I say, ladies and gentlemen, the absolute worst case that could happen is that we don't ask those questions, is that we do simply trust the government, because we have evidence that when we do that, things go wrong. You asked generally about what kind of programs were happening, not just in Germany, but around the world. This is the one that everyone's familiar with, the PRISM timeline. US internet service providers, the one that everybody relies on around the world, started going beyond what the law required to cooperate with the government and give them access to people's data without warrants.
But this was the first time that the CIA was openly advocating for permission to have been able to torture. And that seemed to me so abhorrent that I wanted to disassociate myself from the CIA for the first time since 1963, because I didn't want to be associated in any way, however remotely, with an agency engaged in torture.
Yes, they have the data, and now they have a program that just came out from the Edward Snowden material called Treasure Map, which is the objective is to be able to monitor the activities and movements minute by minute, day by day, of at least 4 billion people.
Mainstream media are an ideological instrument. They have owners, they have commitments, they have advertising support, and so on. But we shouldn't have any illusions. They're not coming from Mars. They are based on existing institutions of power and domination within our societies. And that affects the way what they choose to discuss at all, some things they don't discuss, and the ways in which they do it. It would be almost a miracle if that weren't true. And when they condemn actions like these, that should be taken as praise. Say we're doing the right thing.
It's crazy. There are certain industries, certain issues that people should not be able to profit off of. One is sickness. Second is war and militarism. There are others also, but this is a basic decency kind of question. What we need in the United States is a Green New Deal. And how are we going to finance that? By raising taxes on the wealthy. Instead of Trump giving a $2 trillion tax cut to the wealthiest Americans, we'd have to be raising taxes. We need a wealth tax. And we need to be cutting the military budget and using that for something productive.
Just like in the 1920s and 30s. The center did not hold. Just like in the 1920s and 30s, you had a cynical attempt to shift the costs of the crisis onto the shoulders of the weakest members of society. And the result was fascism. This is exactly what's happening here. Brexit, Angela Merkel's fall from grace, Matteo Salvini's fascist moment in Italy, Orban in Hungary, the fact that every major center-left or center-right party in Europe is now collapsing. These are all the aftershocks, the after effects of our generation's 1930s. And it is essential for us as Democrats, as progressives, and this is what DiEM25 is trying to do in Europe, to unite across different European countries and forget about the old-fashioned political system.
Over time, we are seeing the movements for social and economic justice and for radical climate action really come together, because you cannot get climate justice unless you also have economic and social and racial and immigrant justice. As Martin Luther King said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
The primacy of the profits of these industries come before the health and well-being of the human race and of the the planet itself. So the only hope we have is to build sustained mass movements that engage in civil disobedience.
We can see many people here. We can see masks here. We can see many supporters here. But as Hölderlin said, wo aber Gefahr ist, wächst das Rettende auch. It means even if we are in deep shit, even if our democracies are not democracies anymore, even if institutions represented by the US Embassy, by the UK Embassy, which is just there, even if precisely these governments are undermining democracy, there is hope. There is hope as long as we can gather here, as long as we can give a voice to those who don't have a voice anymore. Free Chelsea Manning, free Julian Assange, free all the whistleblowers who are in prison today.
That the concept that there has been any effect to so-called national security is actually just a propaganda term that the government have put out to essentially scare people into believing that there are issues with acts of blowing the whistle and publishing this sort of information. There was an interesting point when we released the Afghan and then Iraq war logs in 2010. We were showing the US government's war crimes and their killing of hundreds of thousands of people. And yet they somehow managed a very successful propaganda attack where they turned this around and said, we had blood on our hands.
Every administration, whether it's the Democrats or Republicans, when the other team is in power, they put their people in the corporate sector or in what are called think tanks, or as Naomi Klein says, the people paid to think by the makers of tanks. In Europe, NASCAR is not that popular, but it's very popular in the United States, the car racing. And, of course, Donald Trump loves NASCAR because it's sort of considered like America. But the NASCAR drivers all wear like the sponsorship on their uniforms from the different companies that sponsor them. And I really think that in our Congress in the United States, every member of Congress should have to wear the logos of every company that paid for them to get to Washington.
What we can do is just create new networks, decentralize this content, and take it back to the streets, go super grassroots and underground, just like people used to when COINTELPRO was permeating throughout all activism in the US. I mean, we need to basically just take it back, take it to zines, podcasts, really, really super grassroots, where we are taking this critical media directly to the people and no longer counting on algorithms that can just make it go dark online.
We all have that in us. There's a reason why ordinary people are able and willing to take such extraordinary acts. It's just a matter of spending time thinking about what really matters in life, what it is that actually makes us happy, the value of having a clean conscience in knowing that you have done the right thing. And the more people think about those questions, the more Rosa Parks and Edward Snowdens and Sophie Scholes there will be. That was probably the biggest lesson that I learned in doing this work. The lesson is that courage is contagious.